Hi, I'll be doing my presentation on Parkinson's disease. Now, Parkinson's disease dates back into the AD 175. It was referred to as the shaky palsy. So at this point in time, people did not know what this Parkinson's disease was. It wasn't even named at this time. So they called it a shaky palsy because when Parkinson's does take over the body, you do have shakes and tremors within the legs and limbs of your body. James Parkinson wrote an essay in 1817 titled An Essay on Shaky Palsy. So at this point, he himself did not know the name of the disease. He had just referenced back to the information that he had got from people previously looking up this disease, and now is making an informative essay to inform audience about this. For what he's seen, it was something that people were showing up with around this time, and not much people knew what was going on. It wasn't until 60 years later is when Jean Charicot published Parkinson's work and then named it after him. So Jean obviously thought like, hey, this guy is the one who came up with an essay, was informing people, so we should probably name it after him, which was good justice in him. The effects of Parkinson's. Okay, so Parkinson's attacks the nerve system in the brain. The nerves or the neurons in the brain that conduct movement in the body are highly affected by Parkinson's, and they usually die or impaired when Parkinson's takes over the chemicals in the cells in the brain. Dopamine is a chemical that carries the neurons. So when there's a low amount of dopamine, it impairs the basal ganglia, which controls the coordination of the body. So when all these things are impaired, usually what happens is that the body becomes impaired, the limbs become impaired, your regular movements of moving my hand would become impaired because my brain is not sending the right amount of dopamine to tell my limbs or to give me that motion to move. So in here, I just inserted a picture of what I found on the internet, which I think really helps people kind of see how the effects of Parkinson's does on the brain. So when you see a normal brain, you can see that there's probably a good amount of dopamine that is flowing here. It looks pretty normal. There's green and there's red action going on here. Pre-Parkinson, so you can see that at this point these cells are starting to die and be impaired pretty quickly in this brain scan, because there's little to no red areas, which would probably indicate there's action going on in the brain as well, but there wasn't any of that going on here. As well as there's little to none here compared to these ones up here. And then post-Parkinson, so this is after, so you can see there's dots of the red action going on, but you can see that it's spread now to the outer layers of the brain and the outer matters of the brain too as well. So it's not as strong and healthy as this brain scan. Obviously you can see that it's getting really affected by the Parkinson's disease. Dopamine, so this is, I just inserted this picture too because I thought it was a really good one. So it kind of just shows how the neuron releases the dopamine. This is a normal amount. This is about a normal amount of dopamine that would be moved to different cells to control them, to tell your brain to control these things. But a person with Parkinson's, you can see there's little to no. As I said, they do impair and they die off when Parkinson's takes over the brains and the neurons in the brain, stuff like that. So it does kill these off and impair them, so a lot of them are not getting transferred to the receptor to be able to make these movements. That's why people will suffer with moving their own hands, or there's severe stiffness and things like that. Symptoms. So there are early and there are late symptoms of Parkinson's. It's not always just a rush of being paralyzed from this disease. It is a slow, active moving disease, unfortunately. So the first thing is tremors and shaking in the hands. That's usually the most common that people get, is a tremor and shaking of the hand. Change in handwriting, obviously if the hands are tremoring and shaking, the handwriting will change as well. Loss of smell, trouble sleeping. So this has a lot to do with muscle stiffness and things like that. Even though your brain is sleeping and it never turns off, so your limbs do get affected by that, even if you're sleeping or at rest. But it can still hinder trouble sleeping as well. Muscle tension. So again, it affects the dopamine, helps the coordination of the body, the basal ganglia and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of muscle tension. It affects the muscles. It will affect the person's muscles in their movements. Walking, change of walk. So it will get the muscle tension in the walking of your legs, will as well be affected, and little to no facial expression. And those are the first tremors or shaking, and the little to no facial expressions will be one of the most common ones that you will start seeing in the beginning stages of Parkinson's. So during the late stages, so this is after some period of time when this disease is starting to get at its worst. Unfortunately, there is no cure, but so it starts to progressively get worse throughout time. And so this is advanced stiffness in the legs and limbs. So this will drastically affect how a person walks. They usually will have really stiff to short movements of their walking pace, and a hunchback. That's also as well as a late stage symptom, because it is affecting the muscles in the back as well. Frequent falling. So people happen to get a frozen, which is one of the other ones, a freezing, a sudden inability to move. And this, like I said, this is in the late stages. So your body is you're not able to control your body, and it just stops moving, even if you are moving. And that can cause a person to fall because your balance will be completely off. Frequent falling is reported a lot with people with Parkinson's. So a lot of people do get monitoring during that time of late Parkinson's. People start having hallucinations. So as you see in the picture previously before, it does affect different areas. You can see that different areas of the brain was affected by the Parkinson's. So hallucinations would be a common late effect of it after it has advanced in the brain. Excessive tremor and shaking. So usually it would be little to here or there, and it would stop. But at this point, it is excessive and noticeable and uncontrollable. So I just inserted this picture right here of the man who would have Parkinson's. So you can see here, he gets tremors here, and his facial expression is pretty stiff, pretty no expression on his face. It does affect the muscles in your face as well. So that's as well as something rigid. The back is very rigid. You could tell he's hunching over, slightly leaning. Because he can't really sit up straight or stand up straight as a normal person would be able to walk, because his body is very rigid and is very painful to move. There'd be a lot of tremors in the legs and stiffness, and you can see that his balance would look pretty off, and if he decided to stop walking, he could fall. Like I said before, there are no treatments for Parkinson's. There's no cure at all. There are treatments that you could use, but no treatment is going to stop or reverse the Parkinson's disease. There's no cure, but it will substantially slow down those symptoms over time. So like guys like Michael J. Fox and stuff like that, like they're able to work because of probably the medication that they're on. Otherwise, if he was letting it progress, he probably most likely wouldn't be able to work at all, because he's had it for a while, and it probably would be at its worst for him, pretty much at its worst, if not like getting there. So there's no one, but these medications are able to drastically slow down and help a person be able to function with the disease, but over time it will wear off, and those drastic symptoms will come onto the person. Again, there's no cure. It's a very painful disease, unfortunately, but you can live with it. It is just over time it will get at its worst. Doesn't matter if the person's on medication or not. And this is my source page. Thank you very much. Goodbye.